Welcome back to Electric Cafe. Today's album review is on Spandau Ballet's 1986 album, Through the Barricades. This was the band's fifth album. It was funny while I was listening to this album a couple days on inauguration, not inauguration day, but the election day. Then everybody's you know wondering about the future of who's going to lead the country and stuff like that, and what am I doing? Reviewing a 37-year-old, 38-year-old Spandau Ballet album. Just kind of I was kind of laughing at myself, like, ugh, what am I doing? But yeah, I enjoyed music that much to where the whole world, well, at least America, is in an uproar or in balance or worried about the future, and I'm reviewing a Spandau Ballet album. It's just kind of ironic there. But yeah, this was kind of this is an interesting album because the first four albums of Spandau Ballet were well received on alternative radio, and of course in UK at the point they probably had 15 to 20 top 40 songs, and were one of the strongest bands of the early 80s, all the way up from 79 all the way till up to this album in 86. And I kind of got wind of them really early from my older sister, and I can remember hearing Cut the Long Story Short very, very early on, probably as early as maybe 1980, 81. I think it came out in 79. And then my sister had played all their albums, and Spandau Ballet was one of my mom's favorite bands in the 80s. Was Spandau Ballet, especially up around up through this point. The singles collection came out right before this. I do have that as well. That came out right before this, so I mean they were really celebrated up to this album with lots of really strong songs, and they were probably one of the biggest hit makers in UK. Unfortunately, in America, they're kind of known as pretty much a one-hit wonder because of True and the success of that, and it being on like 16 Candles theme, and even later on being PM Dawn used it in their Set Adrift on Memory Bliss, a cover song that was a huge hit, which I do have the CD single around here somewhere. Actually, it's over here somewhere. But yeah, I should have pulled that out so I could show you that. But and again, we're not really reviewing that album. It's just Spandau in general. Maybe I'll bring that out if I review that album. I don't know if I'll do any other. Maybe I'll do some more Spandau Ballet reviews. I mean, they're pretty straightforward. People I think in the UK kind of roll their eyes when they think of Spandau Ballet. It's probably like almost like talking about like Phil Collins. It just has that like very popular, very kind of cheesy, but they had a lot of good songs. I wouldn't say you listen to a Spandau Ballet album and you're like, oh, I hadn't heard this song before. Oh, this is a really good song. Like, there's not too many hidden tracks that are really good. You don't find much deeper than their singles a lot of times. It's not like you're like, okay, I like their sound. I'm going to find a lot more that you don't know. If you know like their main singles, their 20 or so strong singles. There's a few songs in the singles that I don't like, but for the most part, I think they're good songs. There's some that I like better than other. I really like Gold, and I'll Fly for You is a good one, and of course True and Gold. Cut a Long Story Short is one of my favorite. Chant number 2. And there's one I'm missing. The album before this. But there's a lot of good songs on there. On their career. This album was interesting because like the band had just came off a pretty big tour in 84, 85, 84, 85, and apparently they were playing with Def Leppard, or they started to play with some sort of rock bands, and I think they were thinking that they were, well, which I read to kind of back it up. They were kind of thinking that they were pretty strong live, and they were becoming good musicians, and unfortunately, sort of thought that they could um, sort of do like a style of like adult rock music or something like that, and that's kind of what this became. The precursor to that was they had a lot of issues with their European label, which I believe was Chrysalis, and they didn't think that they promoted their last album Parade as much as they should have, and so they ended up leaving after suing the company, and they kind of got out of some of the contract portion of it, and signed to CBS Records, and that spelled their fate for this album, that's for sure. And it wasn't like Spandau Ballet had any sort of like cult following, or they weren't underground, or it wasn't like, but there was a sort of a suave, smooth sort of lounge sound, the synth pop sound that they did, that they were sort of, in some ways, sort of the inventors of. I mean, I'll always play, like, if I play a new romantic set or something like that, or an early new wave set, I'll always play Cut a Long Story Short. That track is killer. But Lifeline and Communication and stuff like that, they kind of mellowed out, but they kind of invented, or not invented, but that was kind of their niche, and that's what they kind of should have stayed with. And as much as they tried to sort of didn't want to replicate True to make another hit, like that was their style, and unfortunately they went completely to a rock style, and just this spelled the beginning of the end of their career. Going to CBS Records, they got all the pressure they wanted, and still didn't get really supported like they probably should. And I don't think, even if they would have got of course they're so egotistical, they thought it was CBS's issue, and them not supporting them either by promoting their music as well, and that's why it did bad. It wasn't because of the music. It's so funny because even in 2017, I wrote this because it was so funny. Kemp, the guy in the band, is it Gary Kemp? I can't remember his first name. He said in 2017 that this album is probably the best album of that showed how they were playing. And I get what they mean by it. It's the most band-like. It's not like they're not hidden behind like a keyboard sound and mellow. Like they're performing more, like doing more with their instruments. But I don't know about best album. Like it's kind of confusing. Like at the same point, they're saying that this album didn't do well, and it obviously didn't do well as anybody wanted to. And that's kind of what happens. That's kind of the sad thing when a band doesn't know their audience. And I mean, there's a lot of bands that have either done well in UK and not done well in America, or vice versa. It's strange how like Depeche Mode became huge in America, and in the UK press and the charts they didn't maybe do as well as they probably should have compared to their American success. There's a lot of bands that's happened to. It's kind of silly for them to think that their style of music is going to go over well because they had one hit in America. Like, I mean, when you look back upon that time, who sounded like Spandau Ballet? It's just, I mean, it was so unique, and there was so much dancey electronic music and rock music and other music and hip hop and stuff like that. Where would this fit in? This is probably get more contemporary adult fans, and even jazz singers, if they went more jazz fans, if they went more jazz than going rock. I mean, I just can't imagine they're thinking like, okay, we're going to do a little bit more rock, and that'll make our stuff more accepted. Like, I get why they did it, but it's like, I mean, they just don't know their audience. If they would just come up with some smooth songs like they did, they would have probably been fine. But there's some god awful music on here, and not the songs themselves. It's just there's certain things about them the production wise, what they're doing, their direction. There's the songs aren't horrible themselves. There's maybe one that I really disliked, but a lot of them just they're not very good, and they're very of the time and trying too hard. Um, in my notes here, I put it's sad that the band doesn't know their audience or their sound, or that they were that far up their own ass that they thought people wanted to sound like this. On a song like an album like this, like, oh, we're gonna give them a more rocky version of us. Who wants a rockier version of Spandau Ballet? Like, I don't know. I don't know what they were really aiming for. They felt like they were better live, and they were more polished and bigger sounding. So they felt like the last album didn't really represent them well. So that's kind of why they went towards this. And that's kind of an example of how difficult the pressure must have been in those days. When you're working for a huge label like that to have hits, like they're just looking at you like, what you got? Oh, okay, that's not good. Okay, can we release this? We think this can be a hit. Oh, you want to release that one? Okay, well, we don't think that's going to be a hit. We want to use this one. This one sounds better. Oh, we'll use this one for the American audience. We won't use this. We won't release the single that you want because we don't think it'll fit the American. We think we want this one to be your single. Oh, that's your sound. We don't really like it. We're only gonna, we're just gonna drop you from the label. You're not the direction they sounded. There was one band I was reading. Oh, it was B-52s. Then their guitar player died. Right? The label thought that they weren't going to continue, so because they didn't support the tour that they were coming in. Like you think they just want to go on tour when they just had a tour member died? I mean, a band member died, and you just think they're gonna, oh, we're not gonna support the album now. They're probably gonna break up. We don't want to put them on tour because they're probably not gonna do well, and they don't want to tour anyway. So we're not gonna support the album, and we're probably gonna drop them from the label. Like who? Like you didn't even see if they wanted to come back. And then the good thing is, looking at the label, the B-52s, they went from, I can't remember who. Warner Brothers, and then they went to Reprise for a Cosmic Thing, and had a huge success in Love Shack and all that stuff. So good for them. They left the shitty label who basically wanted to drop them over them thinking that they were going to break up because their band member died because they didn't want to tour. So it's just like some of the crappy stuff that these labels would put on in the 80s, just thinking they can just use and abuse these artists. Like, I get it. It must have been really difficult, and I can see why there's a lot of turmoil and issues with bands in those times, and not wanting to work with them, and not wanting to put music out for them, and not fulfill their contract, and thinking their contract was shady, and all kinds of stuff in the 80s and 90s was rough. But to have that kind of pressure, and then to change your sound, into being more popular. Like it wasn't so much the label pressure as it was them thinking like, okay, we didn't get supported in America on our last record because we didn't have a big hit. Well, we're gonna sort of update our sound and make the album sound like how we feel like we can sound now because we're better live, and that's gonna be the direction of our sound. Like this, like it wasn't so much the label's choice as it was theirs. So it's just kind of strange that they thought that this was the direction that their fans wanted. Maybe they don't care what the fans wanted, and they're like, this is the direction we have, but it didn't work out, and they obviously saw why, and then they still didn't change it on the next album, and then they broke up. So, inevitably, if you don't stay true to yourself, and if you don't stay true to yourself, you're gonna run the risk of having issues like this, and them not knowing their audience was a grave mistake in their career. Could they have survived into the 90s? who knows anyways. But I think there's always a I think they would have fit perfectly into adult contemporary like Sting or Phil Collins or Sade or anything like that. Like in the '90s, you would think like Spandau Ballet, they had the background, they had the chops to do it. They had the name, they had the career to that point to make some more songs like they sort of had, and then to expand a little bit too. But just to kind of like change labels because you thought that the other label didn't support you, like that was a bad move. And then also, then fully kind of changing their sound and just becoming a rock album, a rock band in a way. It just was a really bad decision. Um, and it's kind of sad that people think that they're a one hit wonder because they were more than that. Um, See, that's what I was thinking. This is at the point when I was thinking like all the stuff going on in the world when I was reviewing this, listening to this album, all the stuff going on in the world with the elections in America here, and I'm debating Spandau Ballet's career. Like, how out of touch am I with what's going on in the world? I'm like in my little music hole here, analyzing Spandau Ballet's end of their career. It's kind of ironic. Uh, the good about this album, not much. The band sounds like they're normal. It just sounds rockier, but the production is a little rough at times. Too much snare. The drummer needs to chill out a little bit. Some of the ending of the songs sound like they're like, like they're performing at some kind of circus or something. Or what they sound like? I put it down earlier. They sound like a cruise ship band. Like, or you go to like an amusement park and there's a band playing in the middle of the food venue, the food where all the food is. What do you call that? Anyways, yeah, where all the food places are. Food court. That's what it's called. Food court. Yeah, you go to the food court and there's a band playing off that. That's what they're playing. Spandau Ballet. It sounds like this. It's just really AM, and it's just they're trying way too hard. There's nothing smooth about really these tracks for the most part, and it's just really rough sounding. Um, yeah, and here I'm going over to the Opportunities album. That was the good. The band sounds their sort of normal self, but not really. Um, the Opportunities really the vibe is there, I suppose. The formula is sort of there, but it's the production in the studio and the desire to go more rocky and poppier than smooth and new wave was a bad choice. And again, maybe they're trying too hard. Definitely trying it hard rock is or more rocky sound was poor. When I look at their songs of the album, it's not good. After a short intro, which I didn't rate, there's Cross the Line, which I give it a half star. It's just pretty basic. The female backup singing is not good. Almost sounds like Whitesnake. Like saying they sound like Whitesnake in 1986 actually made me think like, no, they don't really sound. Whitesnake doesn't sound that bad. Um, I couldn't think of any really cheesy rock bands from '86 that were any worse than Whitesnake or Great White or something like that. I'm trying to think like if Nelson was around in 1986, they would sound like Nelson. I don't know. Starship maybe? Maybe they sound like Starship, like a cheesy Starship. Yeah, just not a good song. Half star. Man in Chains, half star. Sounds like a programmed keyboard demo. Like you go to the Guitar Center and you run over to a cheesy Sony keyboard and you hit demo and in comes Man in Chains. Half star. How Many Lives is a little bit better. It's more than it's kind of what you expect from Spandau Ballet. Good melody. Still a little bit too rocky. Although some of the beginning verses are pretty good. And then, of course, throw in some saxophone, some 80s saxophone, and you're off to cheesy land. 2.25 stars. Expect George Michael to come out to that one if there's a sax playing. Getting saxy with it. 2.25 stars. Virgin's. I'm really surprised I even gave it a 3/4 of a star. Like it's not even. It's of course it's less than okay, but it's bad. It's just I'm surprised I gave it 3/4 stars. Maybe I was just being nice because that one was horrible too. And here's the really interesting one, and I find really ironic and strange. So, "Fight for Ourselves," the track number 6, was actually a single, if I'm not mistaken, off the album. And the funny thing is so this guy named Gary Langdon, right? He's original member of Art of Noise. I think he was recommended, or the guys from Spandau Ballet met Trevor Horn, the producer, famed producer, met Gary Langdon through them. Gary Langdon was part owner of ZZT Records with Trevor Horn. Gary worked on, obviously he was from Art of Noise, but I think he also, I don't know, I know Trevor Horn worked with ABC and a few other bands. I can't remember if Gary did or not, but he does. I think he did work with ABC and some other sort of sounds during '85 that they sort of respected. So what they did was they had him come into the studio for one track and try him out. And this was the song that they tried him out on, and they liked what the direction and the sound, and they kept him. And then the ironic thing is, I'm like, this is the worst song on the album. So it makes complete sense that you're like, great, let's go, let's do the whole album with you. We're really sucking anyways. Let's have you take us to Suckland. This song is so bad. Like, there's a point where the crowd is pumped in. Like they're singing and there's a crowd noise pumped in. It's all really loud and then goes out. It's 5 seconds. The background singers are horrible in it. It's just I gave it no stars. Couldn't even give it 1/4. It's just not a good song at all. Swept I do like a little bit better. It's more traditional Spandau Ballet pop song, melody, harmony type thing. 2 3/4 songs. This is my second favorite song on the album. Snakes and Lovers. The keyboards in this song sound like Asia. Which by '86 sort of sounds dated. If Asia was 80, when Asia came out, with their popular song, can't blanking on the name, but that was '82. And this keyboard sounds like Asia. Kind of makes it sound kind of dated. And then the title track of the album ends the album, thank God. It is my favorite song on the album. The second half of the album I don't really like, but I do like the first couple minutes of the song. I think it is kind of a nice kind of ballad, kind of classic style. It's the only part that you're like, oh, this is a really nice, pretty song. This is Spandau Ballet. It's the only time you really do that in the whole album. Anyways, for me. So I couldn't, you can't deny this is a good song. It's always been the best song on here. As far as I can remember ever listening to this album. But it does get a little bit too big for itself towards the end. The last minute or 2 minutes just kind of gets a little too big and rocking again. So, difficult album. I have it, this is kind of a rough score, but 10 3/4 stars divided by 8 songs is a 1.34. So 1.34, yeah, I kind of gave it a 33 out of 100. It's right above crap. It's bad. It's on the low side of bad. 33 out of 100. 29 would have been crap. I wouldn't say it's crap. But it's a bad album, and it's far below not very good. So it's definitely a bad album. It is what it is, But yeah, just poor direction of choice, and really was the start of their end of their career. Causing rifts with the band. They wanted, do some acting and stuff like that too, and they thought the other band members were jealous or thought they were going to break up or something like that, and sort of started causing rifts, and then by the next album, it was even worse, and then they just broke up, and that was the end of Spandau Ballet. But for a course, for a course of a good 5 6 years, in the early '80s, they just had hit after hit after hit, and they could not do any wrong. And I don't think, even looking back, you could say it's, and at the time it was a little fairly cheesy, but you couldn't deny that they were good pop songs. I mean, I'd rather hear Spandau Ballet in 1983 than hear, I don't know, Jesse Springfield or Rick Springfield. The song is called Jesse. It's Rick Springfield. I'd rather hear Spandau Ballet than hear Jesse by Rick Springfield or whatever was popular in 1983, ZZ Top or something like that. I'd rather hear Spandau Ballet than ZZ Top. Not all ZZ Top. I do like some ZZ Top, but like Legs. I do like Sharp Dressed Man though. Sharp Dressed Man is a cool song. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on Spandau Ballet's fifth album, Through the Barricades. It didn't get through the barricades. It got through. It didn't get through my ratings barricade. It was stopped cold at a 33 out of 100. It got chained up too, and it's left in there still. All right, thanks for listening. Sorry to review such a bad album, but makes it fun too. Take the bad with the good. Hey, I got the record. I still got the record here. It's still in my. It's still in my. Still in my basket here, so I don't hate it that much. All right, thanks so much.